What if I told you the Indiana Fever's biggest asset was being sabotaged from
possibly try to sabotage the greatest asset the league has ever gotten
inside? Why would a coach sideline Caitlin Clark, the very star bringing life to the entire league? And now that Stephanie White's
style of coaching is not for Caitlin Clark
has been fired, is this the beginning of Clark's rise or a sign of something much darker going on behind the scenes? What just happened in Indiana isn't just another coaching change. It's the biggest story in women's basketball right now. Stephanie White gone, fired. And for some fans, the only question left is, what took so long? But let's be real. This isn't just about a coach losing her job. This is about a clash so explosive it nearly tore the Indiana Fever apart. Think about it. Why would anyone take Caitlin Clark, the most electrifying rookie the league has ever seen, and strip her of the very thing that makes her great? Why would you take the ball out of her hands and force her to stand in the corner like a forgotten role player? It doesn't make sense, right? Unless it was never about winning in the first place. Fans saw it. The media saw it. Even Clark herself hinted at it. She said over and over again, "I'm at my best when the ball is in my hand."
Caitlin Clark's greatest asset, which is the creator and instigator of offense.
So why did Stephanie White keep doubling down on an off-ball experiment that clearly wasn't working? Was it stubbornness? Was it ego? Or was it something more? A coach determined to prove a point, even if it meant sabotaging the future of the league? And here's where it gets darker.
Fans online has been threatening to quit watching the Indiana Fever basketball. Fans is threatening to quit going to the game.
Stephanie White's own mentor went on national TV and said the Fever might be better without Caitlin Clark. Without her, the same player breaking records, selling out arenas, and bringing millions of new eyes to the WNBA. If that doesn't make you stop and wonder, what's really going on behind closed doors? Because here's the truth. This isn't just about a bad lineup decision or a single ugly loss. This is about a philosophical war over what the Fever, and maybe even the league itself, should look like. So ask yourself, did Stephanie White simply fail to adapt to the Caitlin Clark era, or was there an agenda all along? And now that she's gone, is Clark finally free to shine, or is the battle only just beginning? July 10th, the night everything fell apart. The Indiana Fever weren't just beaten by the Golden State Valkyries, they were humiliated. A 91-72 collapse on their own floor. And right in the middle of that disaster, Caitlin Clark, but not the Caitlin Clark we all know. This wasn't the fearless floor general dropping dimes, hitting logo threes, and bending defenses at will. No, this was Caitlin Clark shoved into the shadows, stripped of her identity, and left standing in the corner like she didn't even matter. And who made that decision? Stephanie White. She benched Clark's strengths. She ripped away the lethal two-woman game with Aliyah Boston, the one thing that always worked. And instead, she handed the offense to Aari McDonald, a player who wasn't even on a WNBA roster 3 weeks earlier. Can you imagine? The most valuable rookie in decades sidelined so a new arrival could run the show. Was this strategy or sabotage? The fans thought sabotage. The arena was stunned. Social media exploded. Why is Caitlin Clark at small forward? Why is she being used like a decoy? Why would you waste the biggest star the league has ever had? And as if that wasn't enough, after the game, Stephanie White didn't take responsibility.
I felt like there was a lack of competitive fire. With the exception of about 2 5-minute spurts. Our attention to detail was poor.
She didn't admit her plan failed. She didn't even acknowledge that Clark was misused. Instead, she threw her own team under the bus, calling them undisciplined.
Felt like our energy and our competitive fire was not there, and that's disappointing.
Lacking energy and void of competitive fire. But let me ask you, if your players look lost, if your star looks broken, isn't that on the coach? The result was undeniable. Clark finished with just 8 points in her highly anticipated return. 8, not because she suddenly forgot how to play, but because she was deliberately taken out of a system that makes her shine. So here's the burning question. Was this incompetence, or was Stephanie White trying to send a message? Because if she was, she picked the wrong player and the wrong fan base to test. But here's the thing. This wasn't just one bad night. This wasn't just one ugly loss. The cracks between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White had been showing for weeks, and July 10th was simply the explosion everyone saw coming. Go back to May 24th, after a heartbreaking loss to the Liberty. Clark was crystal clear. "I'm best with the ball in my hands. That's when I'm most effective," straight from her own mouth. Now, what did Stephanie White say just minutes later? She praised Clark's cutting. She praised her screening. But her ball handling, the very engine of her game, silence. That wasn't just a slip of the tongue. That was a philosophical divide. A coach and a star player on 2 completely different planets. And instead of closing that gap, White widened it. She kept doubling down, insisting Clark off the ball gave the team different looks. She even compared it to how the Mavericks move the ball without Luka Doncic. Think about that for a second. Luka, a generational talent. The entire system built around him. And White dared to imply that the Fever might actually actually play better without Clark dominating the ball. That's not just a difference in opinion. That's a shot across the bow. That's a statement. And the result? Clark wasn't just being underused. She was being insulted, reduced from a once-in-a-lifetime floor general to some generic 3-and-D wing. The fans saw it. The experts called it out. And Clark herself, she kept dropping little hints in pressers. Subtle, quiet, but powerful. That's when I'm at my best with the ball in my hands. She said it over and over, but nobody in the Fever organization seemed to listen. So ask yourself, was this really about X's and O's? Or was this about control? Was Stephanie White trying to reshape Caitlin Clark into something she's not, just to prove she was right? Because if so, it wasn't just bad coaching. It was a battle of pride, and Clark was the one paying the price. Now here's where things start to get really messy, because the more you peel back the layers, the more it feels like Stephanie White's downfall wasn't just about stubborn strategy. It was about something much darker. Enter Carolyn Peck, White's mentor, her influence. And just days before White was fired, Peck went on ESPN and dropped a bomb. The Fever are better without Caitlin Clark. Better without Clark. Seriously? We're talking about the #1 draft pick, the league's top jersey seller, the rookie leading all first years in scoring and assists. The very reason arenas across the country are packed night after night. And yet here's Peck, the coach who once drove her Vanderbilt players into the transfer portal, saying the Fever would be better off if their generational star wasn't on the floor. Does that sound like a coincidence? Or does it sound like a philosophy being passed down, shaping White's entire approach? Because let's connect the dots. At Vanderbilt, White lost her locker room. Star players left, saying they didn't feel empowered. Fast forward to the WNBA, and the pattern looks eerily familiar. Caitlin Clark, instead of being unleashed, was shackled. Her partnership with Aliyah Boston erased. Her playmaking ignored. Her voice drowned out by a system designed to make her blend in, not stand out. So here's the uncomfortable question. Was this incompetence, or was it intentional? Was White trying to prove that the Fever could win without handing Clark the keys? Or worse, was there an agenda rooted in her own coaching tree to humble Clark before she even had the chance to take over the league? Fans didn't miss this connection. Social media was on fire, calling out the eerie parallels between White's Vanderbilt collapse and the Fever's struggles. And when the games kept spiraling, when Clark kept being shoved into a corner role, those whispers turned into shouts. Stephanie White is sabotaging Caitlin Clark. And maybe, just maybe, they were right. By this point, the fans weren't just frustrated, they were furious. Social media was a war zone. Hashtags calling for White's firing were trending after every loss. Clips of Clark standing in the corner, arms crossed, looking invisible, were going viral with captions like, "How do you waste this?" Fever diehards who once filled arenas with hope were threatening to stop watching, stop buying tickets, stop supporting altogether. And honestly, who could blame them? Caitlin Clark wasn't just the Fever star. She was the WNBA's golden ticket. The player who made casual sports fans tune in. The player who had kids wearing her jersey across the country. The player single-handedly driving sellouts in cities that hadn't seen that kind of energy in years. So imagine the frustration when, instead of letting Clark shine, Stephanie White benched her magic. Imagine being a fan who bought a ticket just to watch Clark dish 12 assists and pull up from a logo, only to watch her camped in the corner, waiting for Aari McDonald to run the offense. Fans felt robbed, and they were loud about it. The media piled on too. Analysts called White's rotations a point-forward mess. Experts accused her of neutering Clark's game. Every press conference felt like gasoline on the fire, especially when White refused to shoulder any blame. She kept insisting the team lacked energy, lacked discipline, lacked competitive fire. But here's the truth. The only thing lacking was a coach willing to unleash the star sitting right in front of her. And then there was Clark herself. She never exploded. No diva tantrums, no Instagram rants, no public shots at her coach. But listen closely, and you could hear everything. After that Valkyrie's disaster, Clark calmly said the Fever deflated. Once Golden State went on a run. Deflated. That's not just about missed shots. That's about spirit, about heart, about a team broken from the inside. Even more telling, she's repeated one line over and over. "I'm best with the ball in my hands." It wasn't anger. It wasn't whining. It was a quiet, constant reminder, a plea, almost, that she knew what worked, and her coach simply refused to listen. The fans heard it. The media heard it. And eventually, the front office couldn't ignore it any longer. And then it happened. The move fans had been screaming for, the move analysts had been predicting, the move Caitlin Clark probably saw coming weeks ago. Stephanie White was gone. Fired. Out. Just like that, the Indiana Fever pulled the plug. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a routine firing. This was a statement. A warning shot to the rest of the league. Because let's be honest, teams don't usually ditch a head coach in the middle of a season unless the situation is completely unsalvageable. And yet here we were. White wasn't just let go because of losses. She was fired because she failed at the one job she could not afford to fail, unleashing Caitlin Clark. Think about it. This is a player who's not just the future of the Fever, but the future of the WNBA itself. She's the league's ticket to national relevance, the star who can move the needle like no one else. If you're the Indiana front office, you don't get to play around with that. You don't experiment with your Ferrari like it's a bumper car. You don't turn your generational playmaker into a background piece. You build the entire machine around her, or you get out of the way. And Stephanie White didn't just get out of the way. She was pushed out hard. This firing was about more than X's and O's. It was about philosophy. It was about identity. And it was about sending a crystal clear message. Caitlin Clark is the Indiana Fever. She's not just a part of the system. She is the system. And if your coaching doesn't reflect that, then you don't belong here. The Fever front office knew the stakes. They knew the fan base was boiling. They knew Clark's patience, while professional, wasn't infinite. And they knew the longer White stayed, the more the entire franchise, and maybe even the league's biggest boom in decades, was at risk. So they acted swift, ruthless, necessary. And now the question becomes, with White gone, what happens next? Does Clark finally get the freedom she's been begging for, or will the Fever find another coach who still doesn't get it? With Stephanie White out of the picture, the Fever are standing at crossroads. And make no mistake, this isn't just about finding another coach. This is about finding the coach. The one person who can unlock Caitlin Clark's full potential and transform this young roster from a disaster into a dynasty. The names are already swirling. Former NBA coach Mark Jackson, a guy known for developing Steph Curry and building the foundation of those Warriors teams. Bill Laimbeer, a WNBA legend with multiple championships under his belt. These are the types of names being thrown around. Coaches who don't come in with an agenda. Coaches who understand how to build around a star, not bury one. And that's the key, because the Fever cannot afford another philosophical tug-of-war. They cannot afford another system that asks Clark to blend in instead of take over. The next hire has to be someone who sees exactly what everyone else already knows. Caitlin Clark isn't just a piece of the puzzle. She is the puzzle. The entire offense, the entire identity, the entire future. It all runs through her. Imagine it. Clark with the ball in her hands every possession. Clark in constant pick and rolls with Aliyah Boston stretching defenses until they break. Clark free to pull up from 30 feet or whip a no-look dime to a cutter slashing to the rim. That's not just highlight basketball. That's winning basketball. That's the identity this franchise should have been building from day one. And here's the kicker. This isn't just about the Fever anymore. The entire WNBA is watching. Every front office, every coach, every player. The message is loud and clear. Adapt to Caitlin Clark or get left behind. Because the truth is, Clark isn't just the face of this team. She's the face of the league. And if the Fever get this hire right, if they put the right leader next to her, we could be watching the birth of something historic. But if they get it wrong again, if they bring in another coach who doesn't understand the assignment, the consequences could be catastrophic. Let's be clear. This firing wasn't just about the Indiana Fever. It was about the entire WNBA. Because when the league's most valuable star gets misused, benched from her own greatness, and dragged into a system that doesn't fit her, the ripple effects go way beyond one locker room. The Caitlin Clark era has already changed everything. Ticket sales, sky high. TV ratings, breaking records. Merchandise, flying off the shelves. And yet, we just watched a coach try to turn Clark into a background piece. If that can happen to her, what does that say about the league's ability to handle its own growth? That's why Stephanie White's firing is a warning shot, not just to the Fever, but to every coach and every GM in the WNBA. The days of ignoring star power are over. The days of forcing generational players to fit into the system are done. This is the Clark era now. Adapt or get left behind. Because here's the truth. The WNBA isn't exploding in popularity because fans want to watch endless ball movement or faceless team play. They're showing up because they want to see the magic. The logo threes, the no-look passes, the jaw-dropping plays that only Caitlin Clark can deliver. That's the product. That's the future. And it's not just fans saying this. Analysts are already calling Clark a once-in-a-lifetime, heliocentric player. Someone who is the system, not just a cog inside it. Compare her to Luka, to LeBron, to the offensive engines who carry entire franchises. That's who she is. That's who the league has on its hands. So when a coach tries to suppress that, when a system actively strips away what makes her generational, it's not just a bad basketball decision. It's a business disaster. It's malpractice. And the WNBA knows it. That's why this firing matters. It's not just about one bad coach. It's about a league realizing, maybe for the first time, that you don't just coach Caitlin Clark. You build around her, period. And through all of this chaos, one thing has stood out more than anything else. Caitlin Clark herself. Because let's be honest, most rookies in her position would have cracked by now. Most 22-year-olds would have blown up on social media, thrown their coach under the bus, or demanded a change in the locker room. But not Clark. Instead of drama, she's handled this circus with a level of poise that feels way beyond her years. Think about it. After being sidelined in her own return game, she didn't lash out. She didn't call out White's bizarre rotations. She didn't even hint at frustration. She calmly said the team deflated after the Valkyries' first run. That's not a meltdown, that's leadership. That's someone who understands that sometimes the loudest message is delivered quietly. And then there's her consistency. Time and time again, she's repeated one line in different ways. I'm best with the ball in my hands. She's said it after losses, after wins, even in passing. Always the same message. Always steady. She didn't need to rant or explode because she knew the truth would eventually speak for itself. And now, with White gone, it finally has. But it's not just about her words. It's about her presence. Even when she looked like a forgotten role player, standing in the corner while others ran the offense, you could see her body language. Controlled, professional, but quietly burning. She never quit. She never made excuses. She kept showing up, kept competing, kept trying to drag the Fever forward, even when the system was working against her. And that's why this firing feels like a turning point. Because Clark didn't need to demand it. She didn't need to campaign for it. By simply being herself, by playing with resilience, by carrying herself with grace, by letting her game and her subtle words do the talking, she forced the change. That's not just star power. That's leadership. leadership. And if Clark is showing this kind of strength as a rookie, imagine what happens once the right coach finally hands her the keys. So here we are, a line in the sand. Stephanie White is gone, and the Caitlin Clark era is officially on the clock. This isn't just about a firing. This is about rebirth, about opportunity, about rewriting the future of an entire franchise, and maybe even an entire league. Because now, for the first time since Clark set foot in Indiana, there's no more tug-of-war, no more clashing philosophies, no more experiments that bury her in the corner. The runway is clear, and the Fever either take off with her at the controls, or they crash and burn. But make no mistake, the WNBA has never been here before. They've never had a star like Clark. They've never had someone who could sell out arenas on both coasts, shatter TV ratings, and force national conversation every time she steps on the court. She is not just the face of a team, she's the face of the league. And now, the weight of that reality sits squarely on the Fever's shoulders. They can't afford another mistake. Not with her. Not now. The next coach can't just be competent. They have to be visionary. They have to understand that Clark isn't a piece of the puzzle. She is the puzzle. She isn't just part of the system. She is the system. And if they get this right, if they finally let Clark be who she was born to be, the Fever won't just be relevant. They'll be unstoppable. And that's why this firing matters. Because it's more than a coaching change. It's a message, a warning, a call to every coach, every GM, every league official. Adapt to the Caitlin Clark era or get left behind. The truth is simple. You don't sideline a generational star. You don't clip the wings of the player who can carry you higher than you've ever gone. You hand her the keys, you get out of the way, and you let her fly. The Caitlin Clark era has begun. The only question left is, who's ready to rise with her?